Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them and how you can build it yourself.
This episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast is brought to you by our sales coaching and consulting services. Are you looking to create repeatable, scalable, and predictable revenue? We've helped thousands of companies grow their business with tailored expert advice backed by testing to ensure they establish the best practices that'll work for them. Head over to bit.ly/predictable revenue coaching to learn more. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about something that is important for marketing. It's important for sales. It's important for anybody that's trying to get in front of their customers and sell them something and do something of value. I'm going to let the expert dive into that in just a second. But I am your host, Sarah Hicks. And today on the Predictable Revenue Podcast, I'm going to be chatting with an expert about how to find companies at scale at the exact moment that they need you. So he helped scale Zinc from 1 to 100 million in go-to-market value in 2 years as their first growth hire. Pretty cool. And since then, he's built growth systems for Mainstreet, Ironclad, Vouch, and more. He runs blueprintgotomarket.com or blueprintgtm.com to help companies find their leads by pain, by monitoring the job descriptions of companies in your TAM, and watches them for key painful moments to help you target better and automate pain-based messaging to your prospects. Jordan Crawford, welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
I'm really excited to dive into this because, of course, somebody who has been in the prospecting role, who's been trying to do the selling thing and then now teaches people how to do it. This is like the number one thing that we want to know how to do is find these people when they need us at scale. So talk to me about kind of the theory behind this and how you are finding these people at scale.
Yeah. So that's a great question. And the very first thing you need to be able to do is to define to reduce the number of complexities that you have to deal with as a sales rep. So I talk about sales reps as basically the tip of a very long spear. And so companies that make a bunch of sort of unfocused decisions, the sales rep is the person that has to take 4 unfocused decisions and try to bring clarity to them. And that's a really hard challenge, right? And so if you're a sales rep or even a sales leader, the way that I like to think about this is how can you turn your ocean into a pool? And so there's a handful of things that you need to get right to be able to do your go-to-market very crisply. I've got a little acronym. It's called CATCAT. It's really unfortunate that was the acronym that came up because I'm a dog person. But I couldn't, I can't change the facts here. So what this acronym is like, first you need to figure out what companies are a good fit for you. And that's not 500 to 5,000 employees in North America. That's people that that require SOC 2 compliance on their pricing page. That is companies that are actively scaling sales, that invest in sales training, right? So you need to narrow down that list, and you need to think about both inclusion and exclusion criteria. So people don't really think beyond these sort of high-level TAM filters. So if a company has fewer than 10,000 hits a month and you're a company like mutinyhq.com that does website personalization, well, they're not going to get a lot of value from your service, right? They just don't have the sheer number of visitors to be able to personalize the website, right? So inclusion and exclusion criteria. ABM is sort of the second A here, which is like you need to be able to cover people in a variety of different channels. It's really important. The bar for a cold email to succeed is so high now, especially if you're going after tech companies, that they need to have experienced your brand in dark social, in advertisement, like on a billboard. And so you're just going to have much better opportunity. And you can do this because you've basically eliminated a lot of companies in your total addressable market. Titles, it's really important to get your titles right. So one of the things that you can do to really hone in on your titles is to just go to Google Jobs and type in some problems that your product solves. So lower cost of customer acquisition, right? And you instantly have a list of titles of people that a company expects to solve that problem, right? So you might be surprised that it's not heads of demand. It's actually, demand gen manager, right? Those are the people that have that problem. So So that's the sort of first cat. The second cat is a channel. So I'll see a lot of people that will do, I'm going to go after engineers on LinkedIn. That's just a bad idea. Engineers hate LinkedIn as much as I love LinkedIn. So you shouldn't be on LinkedIn if you're targeting engineers. And all you have to do is ask your current customers, where do you find new products and services? This is a really simple question. And they're like, Product Hunt or Stack Overflow, right? So you need to go play in that right pool. And the two hardest things, once you've got the first cat done and that next C, the two hardest things for sales reps are approach and timing. And so you can basically answer all the first questions, fundamentals, right? Doing that TAM scoring exercise up front. But the approach is, how do you go after someone, right? What is the way that you approach them? One thing that I do with my product is I will publish a list of all open SDR positions and gate it so that people that are applying for SDR positions can get access to it. And then I send that list to my prospect and I said, here's a list of 50 I know you're hiring for SDRs. Here's a list of 50 SDRs that are looking for positions now. I thought you might find this useful. That's an email that's going to get opened and read every day of the week. And I'm not selling myself at all, right? And some percentage of those customers are like, oh, this is cool, Jordan. What do you do? Right. And well, I sell that data that you just consumed. And then timing. Timing is really, really hard. I'll use job descriptions for this, right? If you're hiring a bunch of SDRs, that's a timing signal. You can do things like an advanced Google search to look at like LinkedIn or Twitter posts to know when people have this problem now. And so you can look at like the dates in a lot of data to identify, wow, their customers are complaining about X right now, so this might be a problem for them to solve. So that's the kind of CATCAT approach.
Very cool. And one of the pieces that we kind of alluded to in the title is that not only are companies or revenue leaders or whoever making these decisions, not only are they not being narrow enough in that focus of who they're going after, but then what they stick that SDR with or that salesperson with is having to figure out a really unscalable way of trying to reach out to all of those people. Yeah. And one of the things that you kind of bring into practice is your idea of turning that kind of stuff into more of a factory. Walk me through that idea.
Yeah, and it's a really important point because you'll see a lot of emails where reps will be celebrated for sending an email like, hey, Jordan, I see you went to University of Missouri and the Tigers, and I like Tigers, and boy, Tigers have great stripes. And let me tell you about the zoo I went to one time, and boy, there's like polar bears there. And it's like, do you want to buy my SaaS product? It's like, what the hell are you doing? It's like, why are we talking about this? Like, I understand that the SDR wants to get attention, but the best way to do this is to really understand, how can I send you an email that is so good that you will forward it independent of you buying my service? And so I gave you one example of how I did that with, with my company. But I have a friend that's sending cold outbound right now where what he's doing is looking at public security vulnerabilities that a company has, matching those to historical breach incidents and sending that to the head of IT at the company, right? And so you can imagine that's scalable because you can find that data, for a bunch of different companies. You're speaking to a specific problem that they have, and you're talking about other people that had that same problem and the data breach that they received for not protecting their systems, right? So that's an email that you can turn into a factory that is about a problem they have. It's super relevant and it's independent, even if they don't use your service. And so what you need to do is figure out, you need to have some empathy for your customer and say, where is their information leaking about the problems they have that I can capture at scale?
Yeah, I think that's the most interesting piece because we are familiar with this concept of triggers for outreach, like keeping an eye out. Maybe you've got a targeted account and you're just monitoring them as you go. And maybe you got a Google alert or something and something pops up and tells you like, oh, that's a reason that I can reach out to them. And I can mention this thing in this email. But like you say, that is not scalable. It's like you're either doing that and then you send one great email, but maybe it takes you 10, 20 minutes to send it and then no one replies to you, or you just send like an automated unpersonalized email and there's kind of no in between there.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing here is that you're saying, well, if you know what you're looking for, you can be gathering those triggers at scale. You can be gathering groups of those triggers and then sending out that outreach in a group as well. So it becomes this one-to-many thing that really feels like one-to-one.
Yes, and you've hit on something really important, which is probably where I should have started. Maybe you should be the guest, and I should be the host. But really, it's that there's this false choice of I either send one-to-one personal emails about the company mascot or that you raised money, and isn't it great to raise money? Or I can say an email that looks like this: Hey, Sarah, me, 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 me. I don't know if you heard, but me, 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 me. Customers also like this: me, 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 me. Do you want a meeting? Right. That's what almost every cold email looks like at scale, right? Because they don't know anything about you. So what this looks like is if you just spend more of your time on putting together the research, and there's fantastic tools. If you go to clay.com/Jordan, you'll get another free month of this tool that will allow you to use Google to search every individual website in your TAM with Google. So that means that you can do things like who on their pricing page mentions an SLA. So they're saying to their customers, we will provide you an SLA. So if you have some monitoring software that helps ensure SLAs, now you know that that's a pretty good fit. And you can instantly score tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of websites to know that. And so instead of investing time on researching Jordan the person, investigate blueprintgtm.com and all of the signals that exist around that domain to identify what the problem looks like at scale. And then you either can use technology like Clay, or you can use outsourcers to put this together in a structured format.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting, especially these days while we have so many more tools at our disposal than we ever had before, and don't necessarily know how to use them to our
Yeah,
advantage. That
yeah.
feels like it's such an edge that any sales team would then have over every other person prospecting the same market, because it's just not being utilized.
Well, I do want to speak specifically to what you said there, because people, sales reps specifically, they love tactics, and they get really obsessed with tactics, and they'll say, oh, I should copy that tactic. But this really is best when you take what you know about your customers and bring that to your leads. So your customers may have some unique insight about a problem that you solve that's non-obvious to them. And so that might mean, oh, we spent 6 months doing it this way before we came to you, and then you solved it for us in 2 days. Boy. So now you have conversations with your customer success people, and you say, what was it like when Jordan joined? Well, Jordan was doing XYZ manually. And then you start to have patterns, and you look for those things, and you say, aha, I see that these things are true. And because these things are true, now I can identify other people that are in that same situation and take my customer insight to the prospect.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I think it's a perfect spot for us to walk through some examples with some real companies so that you can
Yeah.
walk us through just like where you even begin on this type of thing. We've
Yeah,
got a
that sounds
couple
good.
of suspects that we've brought in from the old predictable revenue client book or previous client book. And yeah, I'm excited.
Great. So let's start with Neo4j. So neo4j.com. And I'm just going to read out what they do. This is not me summarizing. I'm just literally reading out their H2. So if you're like, Jordan, that's not a good summary, don't blame the company. With proven trillion plus entity performance, developers, data scientists, and enterprises rely on Neo4j as the top choice for high performance, scalable analytics, intelligent app development, and advanced AI ML pipelines. Whoa, that's a lot of things that they do.
Yeah.
And like, congratulations to them for building a product that can serve so many different use cases. Well, the first thing I keyed on is the H1 here is blazing fast graph petabyte scale, right? So now I want to think, who's at a petabyte scale, right? This is really for super large companies. So I'm going to look in their job descriptions, right? Who talks about this? So I just like popped up Google Jobs. I said, look for AI and ML. And I looked for security and petabyte, right? So people are going to say they're looking for an AI ML engineer that has experience with petabyte scale. So now I'm able to drastically limit the types of companies that I'm focused on. And I can look historically at some job descriptions as an example. They mentioned too about having someone that requires SQL. So how can you find a number of people that are data engineers at the company, right? Relative to their total engineers, to their total headcount. So if I have 20,000 people in my organization and 1,000 of them are data engineers, well, that probably means that I'm investing really heavily in this. It's a big part of my business. I may also want to search for like graph database, right? That's one of the products that they service. So who mentions that, right? I can use Google again to crawl domains in my TAM to see who talks about that in their engineering blog, for example. I may
Mhm.
look at different GitHub repos, right? So, what are the engineers at companies that are following relative GitHub repos to have some understanding? Wow, they really care about these open source libraries that are so important to this type of work. Like, you wouldn't use X or Y library if that wasn't the case. You might look at security. So, is implementing secure ML really important? So they talk about like GDPR, CCPA, BCBS 239. Who knows what that means, but it sounds very government friendly. You know, it's like, oh, you got to be BCBS and FRTB. So like, I love these acronyms because they don't really appear anywhere else, but
Right.
people might talk about this inside of their terms and conditions. They might talk about this in their /security page. So there's a company called
Mhm.
Command Bar that is a product-led growth company, and they have a whole page on security. So you now have some understanding. Wow, they really care about security. They're advertising it as the first thing after their main domain. This is what we care about, right? So you can kind of start to gather a picture. If you put all of this together, you can say, here are the engineers that are following these companies. Here's how they talk about themselves in their pricing page and their legal terms. Here's the insights of what they're using internally based on their job descriptions. Here's the ratio of certain types of employees. And you can do this once a quarter for all of the domains in your total addressable market. Data is cheap enough to do this. And you can start to come up with an account score that says this account has all of these variables that make them a good account. And in the research, you get messaging for free because you have some understanding of their problems and can describe those problems back to them. That was a
Sure.
mouthful. Was that helpful? I mean, I feel like I was.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just go on a rant, so you got
No,
to
it's
stop me.
great. No. I'm totally starting to get the whole picture. It's like we're starting with that understanding of, well, I guess seeking the understanding of who cares about the things that we already do. So don't make it complicated. One of the things that I see time and time again with our clients or just companies that we speak with about, messaging, targeting, that kind of thing, is that they know what their features are and they know what features they think are cool. And then they're like, I think you'd think they're cool too. And then that's what they kind of want to share. And then when you actually have the conversations with the prospects or customers, they're like, you know what, I actually didn't buy because of that. I bought because of this other
Yeah,
thing. That bit
yeah,
I didn't really care about. It was like, I guess, a
yeah,
cool add-on. So
yeah.
this
And
removes that, right? You
I,
can't
I
do that if you do it this way.
I love that, and I would say you could still do it wrong if you don't have this insight. And one of the things that if you're a SDR that's starting, go read the case studies and compare
Mhm.
that to your headers. And so you'll notice that the headers are like the fastest way to speed up ML pipelines, and the case studies are like, oh, we didn't know how to use ML, and this company taught us. Like, oh
Right.
wow, those are like worlds apart, right? The customer is not talking about all the speeds and feeds; they're talking about the job to be done. A Clayton Christensen framework that's like,
Yeah.
this is the problem that I solved with this. And so go take the best customer support person out to dinner and be like, hey, Sarah, like, I know that you're working with these customers day in, day out. Like, do they care about ML cloud security? Like, no, they don't give a crap about that. What they care about is that they didn't know how to implement a model, or they're going to tell you there's going to be those non-obvious learnings that will help you understand those problems a little bit more. And that's like kind of where the approach comes into.
Mhm.
You can have a better understanding of what that looks like. But you're not going to know what data to look for unless you understand what your customers know about your product, not what you know about your product. It's usually wrong. Your customers will know, and so you kind of have to chat with them.
Yeah, that's a great point. And jobs to be done as well. Yeah, that's something that
Yeah.
we love to come back to. A predictable revenue, because it's the same thing. Like, we get so caught up in the features and what we do, and then, well, how can I like shoehorn this feature into that person's job when it's
Oh,
like very simple? They have a job to do, and if there's something getting in their way, if there's an obstacle to that job to be done, and you can get rid of it or like help plop them over the other side of it, that's
yeah.
all you need to care about. Like, it's less complicated than you think it is if you
Well,
just strip it back to those
yes.
terms.
Well, and this is the nice thing about this work is that, and this is much harder to do for companies that like Neo4j. That's like, what do you do? We do everything. And so, like, if you look at their solutions, and they have 100 of them, right? Like almost nearly 100. I'm exaggerating, but they have a lot of solutions, so they can benefit a lot of different types of people. So what generally happens is that you come in with a muddled message because you give the same message to a bartender that you do to a co-pilot, right? And it's like like the bartender has a problem with getting fresh mint. The co-pilot has a problem with his control stick, like that and if you're finding indications that that guy has just run out of mint, that female co-pilot, that the stick is not working, then you can just say, hey Jordan, I noticed that your plane is not flying straight. You're flying kind of crooked here, and it seems like you're attempting to correct this problem, but maybe it's not working for you. How's that going? Right. And so if someone has a stomach ache and you come to them and say, I have medicine for your headache, they're going to be like, go away. Like, I have a stomach ache. And so this is harder to do as organizations get bigger because their products expand and the rep doesn't like focus in on identifying a problem. And that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about here.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, let's walk through a different example that's in a different realm from Neo4j.
Yeah, this is good. So we're talking about cost certified today. And here's their H2 here. Turn your boring static construction estimates into a beautiful e-commerce buying experience for your customers. That's a great line. Whoever wrote that, they should get a gold star, because I totally understand what you do. It's a clear and clean tagline. Well, I'm going to give them I'm going to go ultra tactical here and give them a really good way to identify pain. So, and just like stick with me here, I'm going to read out a Google search. This is going to be like a little bit obnoxious, but you will thank me for it later. So type this into Google: site:/Yelp, and hit a space, in URL :home services, and then put in quotes, took much longer. So what this Google search will do is it'll search only Yelp.com, and in URL, Yelp always puts home services in the URL. And took much longer. That's what people say to their general contractors when a project goes way longer than they expect it to, right? Which is the problem that Cost Certified solves, right? So now I instantly have a list from Yelp where there's real customers that say, I am so pissed that I hired this general contractor and they took 8 weeks longer than they should have. So all I have to do is take that timely message. Hey, Sarah, did you see Jessica's comment on June 19th about how her construction project took 5 weeks longer than she thought it should? That was a 1-star review. It's like one of your only. Boy, I can imagine how painful that must have been. Do you think that this problem, like I was reading the job description, and it seems like this problem might be related to some of your subcontractors? Like, what if you could forecast this better so that didn't happen again, right? It's like, oh, yeah, Sarah, thank you so much for the message. That is absolutely true. Boy, like I can't tell you how upset we were. That project went long, and we had delays from, several subcontractors, right? So now you've identified who has the problem. Now you start to see more and more of those Yelp responses to the general contractors, and you do something like go to their website and say, all right, well, do they have a tool today? Now, my guess is that Cost Certified probably wants a website in the Goldilocks zone. So not a website that's from the 1800s, like the Space Jam website. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's the original Michael Jordan Space Jam movie. It's still online. It's fantastic. So they probably don't want like construction sites in the Space Jam era, but they probably also don't want sites like Made Renovation or Block Renovation, these like ultra tech companies that like own every piece of the process. So they want to sort of focus, who are the folks that are savvy enough to have a website, to invest in a website? You can use technology like Built With to understand, do they have a marketing pixel on their site to know they're spending money on ads, right? Do they have Mixpanel installed so they're tracking analytics, right? So how can you kind of identify these construction companies in the sweet spot? And once you've done that, then you can look for things like, you might even look at permit records here, right? So when was the permit filed and when was it completed? And compare that to what you know from your customers of like, oh, average jobs in Kentucky for a home renovation should take 4 weeks. Yours take on average 20. Like, what does that difference look like for you? So that's the kind of stuff that you can do when you think about, how can I structure the world and identify pain at scale?
Yeah, that's such a cool trick. the URL, and don't worry, everybody, we'll like put it in the blog and stuff too,
Yeah,
so that you can see
sorry
it.
about
You don't have to like
sorry.
pause, rewind, pause, rewind. But that's very cool. The idea of putting that tiny little keyword phrase that you think would have come up in the review, because I imagine you can switch that out, right? You can keep thinking like, okay, what are the types of things people are saying? And you just keep going until you are building these various lists of people who have received those reviews. And then there's your target list.
Yeah, exactly. And I did the same thing with a company that does parking lots, that replaces parking lots. So I did siteyelp.com quotes potholes in parking lot, and I did a Google image search. So these are potholes that are so bad that someone said, I don't even care about the business. I love the business, but I go in and I take a picture of the pothole in the parking lot, and I'm like, boy, I really like eating at Applebee's, but that damn pothole is so terrible, right?
I
And
have to put it on Google.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, wow, your business is doing great, except for the fact that you have so many potholes that your customers are complaining about the potholes in the parking lot. So now you have a perfect list of people that you should go after. It's like, you definitely need help with this because your customers are noticing it.
It's very cool. Yeah. I think it's such an interesting strategy. And I'm just like, wheels are turning of all the ways that I can start to try and use this.
Well, yeah, I mean, and there's other things that they might look at as well. For example, SimilarWeb has traffic data, right? So if people aren't going, a lot of construction folks are phone people, right? They're like existing on their phone. And so their website isn't always a huge part of their business. So it's different if you have an organization that has 50,000 visitors to their website, right? And perhaps they know conversion rates. So it's like, hey, Jordan, like you have a huge spike in traffic in the last 6 months. Like, but I noticed that your reviews have stayed the same. Like generally those things for tech companies, the more traffic they get, the more deals they close. Like, has the corresponding increase in traffic related to more deals for you? Like, no, you can't buy on our site, right? Like, so that's the kind of thing. And this seems hard to do, but outsourcers are very cheap. And you can use a tool like Clay to score 50,000 domains at once without any tech knowledge whatsoever. So you just need to think more in systems and less in people or leads, and spend a little bit more time on research here to identify what this looks like.
Very cool. Do you think we dive into one more example?
Yeah. Okay. This is the one that I have probably the least familiar with, Graphium Health. So I'm going to read out this description to give you an understanding. What could your anesthesia group accomplish with an extra 15% of its revenue? Okay, they're selling money. It's always a good thing to sell money, right? All right. Well, let's read the headline too. Your anesthesia practice may be losing 1 out of every 12 charges. You may be getting penalties from CMS and MACRA non-compliance. Are you getting MIPS performance bonuses? That all adds up really quickly. Wow, a lot of jargon, which means that they're speaking exactly to their it says, great news. In 90 days, your practice can be putting extra revenue towards salaries, marketing, and other expenses. Wow. Nice. Okay, so they're selling both acronyms and money. So those things usually go well together because it means that they know their customers very well, that they can throw acronyms at them. So I don't know anything about anesthesia except that I'm my best self when I'm asleep. So let me kind of help you think through some things that they might look through. So I looked at alliedanesthesia.com, which is just one of these types of practices, and they have a list of insurance providers. And they have over 100 different insurance providers. Whoa, that's so insane. So you imagine that person might have way more complicated billing challenges than a company that says we accept 2 types of insurance, right? So now they've got a better understanding. Okay, I'm going to be able to save the money for sure because they're losing more money because it's hard to navigate 100 different insurance providers. You could look at billing responsibilities. So this is like a 2-trick. So you can look in their job descriptions to see if they're hiring a billing coordinator, and they'll say things like manually enter data into our 1980s system. And it's like, oh, get in your Model T car and drive down to the post office. And you're like, oh my gosh, this company's losing lots of money. Maybe 80% of the revenue, not 15%. You can even get sneaky here. You can find the billing person and you can ask them a question directly. Hey, I'm thinking about going to your anesthesia clinic, and I wonder, what is your return time time for billing look like? And they're like, oh, well, it takes us 568 years to file a reimbursement. Now you can just take that data to the practice owner and be like, hey, I contacted Sarah in your office and she said it's going to take about 4 millennia for me to get my money back from the insurance carrier. Like, do you think you might want to speed that up? Like, well, okay. You could, they'll use a lot of acronyms. So they could just have an acronym soup here and look in the job descriptions to see who's hiring for acronym soup. That'd be helpful. There's another acronym, TJC, which is the Joint Commission. So that was like a certifying body, and they will sell you data. Like they have a data mart. So you might actually go buy data from them. So who is on that, who's already been certified? So you can, maybe this is a way to eliminate companies, and you can use that information to be like, I see that you're not certified with this body. And sometimes their website talks about like processing for bills. Who talks a lot about billing codes, right? So in their job descriptions, you can look for billing codes. Who's using electronic forms? So again, you might look at complaints, right? Like I mailed them a form and they didn't get back to me. So people will talk about that, like, oh, I wish I could submit, or like you might look like submit online or like file a request online. You might also look at locations. So how many different locations does this anesthesiologist office have? So you imagine that an office with 50 locations is probably going to have, and maybe this goes the other way. Maybe they've already solved it. By the time that they get to 50, they've already invested in their own system. So it may be between 10 and 30 locations. So those are all the types of things that you can do. And all you need to do is record yourself doing this for 20 domains in your total addressable market, and just talk out loud on a Loom video and say, here's what I'm noticing, and then have an outsourcer, or you can use Google to do this too, to say, go click on locations and just type the number that you see there. And it's not really hard to do. You can get someone in the Philippines to do this like dirt cheap. And suddenly now you have all this really great granular data to be able to say, if I can only spend time on 10 leads today, who are those 10 leads?
Amazing. I really like this stuff. It's so interesting. I think every company out there needs to be figuring out a way to narrow down their focus, right? We all know that kind of timing and relevance and personalization is not necessarily the right word, but it's the relevance piece, right? The timing and the relevance is the most important thing, especially with outbound, when you're going out there and you're like, needle in a haystack. Is this relevant to you? But if you can say like, actually, I plucked you out of this haystack because I saw you lost down there. Now we want to have a conversation.
And exactly. And I'll give you one more example that's working really well for us. So one of the things that we're doing is I have data on who's hiring, and I know how long their jobs are open, how many jobs are open, and what they're hiring for. So for recruiting agencies, I can programmatically say, hey, Jordan, I see that you have 274 open jobs, that the average job in your database has been on the market for 3 months. And if I sum the total number of open days for all of your open jobs, you will have lost 100 years. This is like real, 100 years of productivity. You have launched like more than one Abe Lincoln's worth of productivity at your organization. Are you interested in ways to be able to hire faster? And so I don't have to trick that person and be like, hey, you want an ice cream bar? I got a free ice cream bar and a free Amazon gift card. And it's like, take 15 minutes with me. It'll take 2 minutes and 29 seconds. Can I have, you don't have to like try to trick people's attention. You're like, hey, I'm just describing something interesting to you that I found through combing your data. Like, probably hiring is a pretty important priority to you. And you're going to be maybe even desperate to have a conversation with me because you're like, wow, if this is Jordan's first approach, like our second interaction must be good,
Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting. Okay. Well, I think that's a perfect place to wrap it up. If people want to learn more from you, Jordan, if they want to get in touch with you, where can they do that?
Yeah, great. So my website is blueprintgtm.com, as in go to market. My email is Jordan, Jordan, at blueprintgtm. And I post extensively on LinkedIn, and I have a YouTube channel where I will do like go to market hot takes for folks. And so if you're looking for some other tactics on how to do this, and possibly some silliness, I can't say that there won't be any silliness. Those are the best places to see me.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure to link all of that stuff underneath where you guys are listening, watching to this, and in the blog, of course, as well. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. It was so interesting.
I'm so grateful to be here, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you to all of you for joining us for another episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast. Please, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button on YouTube or follow us wherever you're listening so you can be notified each week when we have wonderful guests like Jordan joining us and teaching us the ins and outs of sales and marketing, revenue, all the stuff that's the most important to you guys. We'll catch you next time.